You are now listening to the HBCU Wall Street podcast.
Oh my God, Carolina chicken waffles.
The Carolina chicken.
Carolina chicken waffles, where it's at?
All right, first of all, the food is good.
I just had to come back to get some dab because the chicken was fire.
It's the best chicken they've ever had.
This lemonade is the bomb.
They need to come get some.
They need to come get some right now.
I had the chicken bites, and I normally don't like anything hot, but these were off the chart. I mean, they weren't too hot, they weren't too mild. They agreed with me, and the waffle, I had the pecan waffle, and this time I've got the red velvet waffle.
Man, excellent food, excellent service.
The service, the customer service, the love, the commitment, all these things make for a better experience. That's what matters to me, and that's why I keep coming back.
Carolina chicken and waffles, come try it, you won't regret it.
You better come get it while it's hot.
Man, this is the best food, hands down. I don't know what they put in it, but I can't stay.
Good morning. Welcome to the HBCU Wall Street Show. I am your host, Bianca Little, and I'm joined today by Russell Fugett. Russell, thank you so much for being with us today.
Bianca, thank you so much for having me today.
So let me just do a quick intro for you, if you don't mind. So Russell is a serial entrepreneur coming from a really long legacy of entrepreneurship, which to me is such a beautiful idea. I really hope that we continue to build Black dynasties of wealth and entrepreneurship. I just love that. You're also the executive director of Equity Endowment, which is a 501c3 nonprofit with the goal of closing the racial wealth gap. And I have to add a quick plug, also a fellow graduate of the George Washington University School of Business, as am I. So
I did not know that. Okay.
I did. I got my MBA from GW. So happy to talk to a fellow alum and really excited for you to share everything that you're doing to close the racial wealth gap.
Yeah, well, Bianca, it's great to meet you and to be with you, and just so excited. While I did not have the pleasure and the honor of attending an HBCU, I certainly stand on the legacy of so many people in my family. My late grandfather, Gene Fugett Sr., who started out at Morgan, but then got married and had to move a little to the west side of Baltimore, and where he could walk and finish his degree at Coppin State.
Okay.
And my maternal grandfather attended Lincoln University.
Oh, wow.
And then, of course, people know from my family, most notably my late uncle, Reginald F. Who was the first African-American to own $1 billion business, of course, is an alum of Virginia State University. Trojans, go Trojans. And the business school there is named after my uncle. So anyway, I could go on, but such a great legacy and rooted in me as a fifth-generation entrepreneur, fourth-generation college graduate. That certainly would not be possible as an African-American had there not been historically Black colleges and universities. So excited to be able to bring about some change in that area on the financial side and continue to help stabilize our HBCUs with some of the work that we're hoping to do here at Equity Endowment.
Absolutely. Well, the HBCU universe it's a culture, it's a family. So you are officially adopted into the HBCU family for sure.
Absolutely. Well,
so when I was doing a little bit of background research, one of your many entrepreneurial endeavors is Joomla Network. Did I pronounce it properly?
Correct. Yes.
Okay. So Joomla is a diversity and inclusion consultancy and knowledge network, but I noticed that your title is Chief Encouragement Officer. Tell me a little bit about exactly what that means.
Well, I think when you think about doing the work of diversity, equity, inclusion, and particularly in this moment that we're in here, it's in early 2024, where we're literally every day getting news out of the courts and out of the legislatures of different states that DEI is going to be shut down, people are being let go from universities, et cetera, books are being banned, all of these things. It can be very discouraging. I'll have to admit that even on my toughest days, I'm discouraged. But what I found is that when you come into an environment, whether it's a nonprofit, for-profit, professional environment, and create an atmosphere and have a language that means, the DEI is not just about Black folks or gay folks or what have you. It's about everyone. It's about all of us, right? There's so many different types of diversity. And I had the opportunity to get certified based on the International Organization of Standards definition of diversity and inclusion. Paper 30415 came out, I believe it's May of 2020. 2022, that really talks about diversity, looks at it from a lens of risk, right? But also like to intersect that with thinking about people and all of us, right? So how do all of us show up in the workplace, and how do we truly maximize talent, right? Talent is not hard to find, and it can be even harder to keep. So once you attract it, how do you want to keep your talent as an organization? How are you going to create value to meet the critical needs of this time in an increasingly complex world, increasingly global world? So there are forces in this society that want to reject that perspective and reject globalization and reject the realities of this time and this season, the changing, shifting demographics of this country here in the United States, and of the global majority certainly shifting as well. And the centers of power and economics are certainly shifting. And so it's really incumbent upon the best organizations to figure out how can they leverage and maximize all of their diversity. And so to me, I think that's an encouraging message. So I come with that message of let's be encouraged. As I say, it's something I have to figure out or be afraid of or feel like I have to feel guilty or shame around. No, this is an opportunity for us to grow. Growth is uncomfortable, but it's an opportunity for us to grow. And that's where the innovation happens. That's where the new things happen. That's where we can really solve for the critical needs of this time, as I said. And so that's really the message I come with, is an encouraging message, not a wagging the finger, not looking too much backward, of course, and saying, using the language of Sankofa, we want to go back and take from our past, but we want to do that so that we can move forward. And so that's just been my message when I'm into those spaces around equity, around diversity and inclusion. And so I hope, when people hear that message, they're encouraged and see that there's an opportunity, maybe a little uncomfortable, but there's an opportunity for growth for themselves and for their organization.
Well, I'm interested too in, your perspective on growth, on change, because with Equity Endowment, you're really doing something novel to improve the situation of equity between specifically Black households, households of color, and white households. When you think about closing the racial wealth gap, that is a lofty goal. And I just kind of want to level set the listeners so that we know what we're talking about exactly. The latest data from the Federal Reserve shows that the racial wealth gap is continuing to grow. It has widened even further post-pandemic. The gap is about $240,000, a difference between the median white household and the median Black household. And just to put that in simpler terms, for every $100 in wealth held by a white family, a Black family has about $15. And that was as of 2022. And with that growing, we can only expect that number is getting even larger. So tell us a little bit about what exactly is Equity Endowment and how you're hoping that it will aid in closing the racial wealth gap.
Well, thank you for those statistics. And I know it can seem overwhelming and daunting when you think about the challenge like that. And of course, we know that really in order to ever solve that problem, it's really going to be a significant shift in public policy from our federal government, a significant shift in economic policy, perhaps even from our federal government, from our Treasury, to really make that impact. And happy that the Department of Treasury does have a committee in the Department of Treasury. I think former Philadelphia Mayor Michael Nutter, if I'm not mistaken, is chairing that initiative. So there is some work being done in this current presidential administration to look at this issue and figure out ways to create equity. But from our standpoint, we're really looking at what's the private sector, right? So I'm creating Equity Endowment with the mission of creating an endowment similar to how a college university has an endowment that pays for buildings, pays for faculty salaries, et cetera, and using that to close the wealth gap. So the idea initially is to raise a $50 million fund. We would invest that fund with minority fund managers. So now we know minority fund managers tend to invest in minority businesses, right? We tend to invest in African American, Latino, Native American, Asian businesses because we know where those deals are. We know in our community what will work, what won't work. We know the business owners, the entrepreneurs, the innovators, the scientists, the engineers in our communities that come from our HBCUs, that come from our community. If we went to a George Washington University, we know where those deals are. And so but unfortunately, as we learned, I think it was TechCrunch told us in the Q3 of 2023, I believe it was 0.23%. Not 2.3%, 0.23% of all venture capital money went to Black-led venture capital firms. So we're not even getting an opportunity in terms of access to capital to be able to invest, right?
Right.
But I was blessed recently to be a part of a Super Crowd Baltimore conference, and there is a growing awareness among wealthy white folks to say, as the demographics shift and as this country changes, in order to find opportunity and innovation is going to increasingly look more like you and me. And
Absolutely.
I want a piece of the action. I got capital. I want to have a piece of the action. So there's truly a unique opportunity at this moment in time, even with DEI being shut down, even with books being put aside, for us to do something unique. And certainly I am engaging in category creation, which to this point has made things very challenging because philanthropists don't quite know what box to put me in. And finance people want to say, well, how do I get a return when you're a 501c? I want to make an investment and get a
Sure.
return. You're a fund, right? I'm like, why am I a fund? So again, it's been a very unique opportunity. But again, the endowment, we're going to inject money into the economy that way, investing millions of dollars into minority communities. And then we'll take the proceeds, the return on that investment, and grant it to nonprofit organizations doing programmatic work, primarily focused on entrepreneurial enablement and new business creation to close the wealth gap. And of course, Bianca, I'm sure you also know that minority-led, Black-led nonprofits have a significantly difficult time raising money, particularly if you're at the grassroots level, when you're close to the problem. And particularly, I think even for Black women, have a challenge raising capital or have undue burdens of reporting from certain foundations, and this research and reports that speak to all of this. We want to close that gap there as well and enable our best social innovators to have access to capital, be able to meet the critical needs and innovate in their own communities. And so it's a two-pronged approach. It's sustainable. We all know this issue is generational. It's going to outlast me, unfortunately, but we're creating this sustainable pool of capital and growing it over time. We'll be able to make impact in perpetuity, and that's really the goal of having an endowment.
So why did you take this particular approach in attempting to close the wealth gap? I feel like the low-hanging fruit that we always hear is, home ownership, real estate, that type of thing. But why did you feel like this approach was the right thing for you and for the endowment?
Well, my grandmother raised me and always said that we grew up and live in an ownership society. And my late uncle, Reginald F. certainly understood this when he, backed by Mike Milken, $1 billion, bought almost 60 companies in over 30 countries in 1987 and acquiring Beatrice Foods. Certainly my late grandfather, Joseph Howard Payne, one of the first 36 African-American attorneys in the state of Maryland, understood this when he accumulated multiple properties in real estate and had tenants. And my grandfather would tell me going around on Saturday to collect rent from some of their tenants here in Baltimore, right? So we understood, my family's been blessed. I've been blessed to first, again, like I said earlier, get educated, but then also we understand ownership. And so our tagline at Equity Endowment is we're creating a community asset. We lack assets as a community. So yes, home ownership is one path. Increasingly with the way home ownership has gone in the last 5 years post-pandemic, that's a much higher hurdle to leap over, particularly for my millennials and members of Gen Z, because the amount of capital you need to access that market is difficult. It has increased rather.
For everyone.
Of course, that being the sole focus also, because unfortunately in our communities, housing prices are often depressed. And I know there's many stories of coming out of the 2008 housing crisis, and there have been many lawsuits against large banks. I won't name names because I'm trying to ask some of those same banks for money as we speak. But there were many lawsuits. Just here in Maryland, there were large lawsuits brought by the government against large banks for discriminatory lending practice. And with the mortgages back in 2008. So we know even housing hasn't been a cure-all. There's no silver bullet, right? And I'm not here to say Equity Endowment will be a silver bullet, but it will certainly be another sustainable tool in the toolkit. And then we also want to really think positively about collaboration, because we often in the nonprofit sector broadly collaborate around information, but don't collaborate around resources. And really by having a pool of capital, by raising a $50 million fund and being a Black-led nonprofit, we'll have a pool of capital and we'll have resources to be able to foster a different level of collaboration that will, again, I believe, spur new innovation, where you think about fintech innovation or social innovation, and you think about the new technologies that exist with artificial intelligence, et cetera. I think there's some exciting things that potentially, not to get too far ahead of myself, that we could do to really address this issue.
Absolutely. So when you're talking about reinvesting the proceeds from the fund, what type of nonprofits are you targeting that will do the programmatic work that you're most interested in seeing?
So we're just beginning to really experiment with that model, and having raised a little bit of, a small 5-figure sum, in all honesty, right? So our first grant is going to the Greater Baltimore Urban League Haysboro Center for Entrepreneurship, where they do entrepreneurial mentoring and coaching, right? And so that really is a model of how do you support entrepreneurs in our community that are trying to figure out how to start their own business, how to create jobs and opportunity. And so really that's really going to be the model. We certainly want to be national, very much based here in Maryland, but are focusing on this issue nationally and want to be able to scale that model to have impact. So we've certainly looked at other organizations across the nation that are doing grants and stipends, that are doing entrepreneurial enablement and support. And certainly have had pitches from organizations that say, hey, healthcare is an issue, education, which my family's foundation, named after my uncle, certainly has a big focus on education and financial literacy. And we've looked at those issues as well. And of course, home ownership, as you mentioned previously, right? Those have certainly been areas where you think about creating wealth. If you don't have your health, if you don't own a home, those things can be really, if you're not educated, it can certainly be hard unless you have a really high level skill set. So I really want to look at things holistically, but also want to be able to be very laser focused so we can really have measurable impact.
So, you kind of alluded to this earlier when we were talking about diversity and inclusion at the top of the conversation. The goal here is to shrink the racial wealth gap. But we've seen all of this legislation under the auspices of, reverse discrimination that has prevented various organizations, the Fearless Fund comes to mind immediately, from investing directly into Black communities and providing funding to businesses of color. How do you anticipate being able to continue to have a focus specifically on the Black community in the current climate that we're seeing?
Well, again, I'm starting, at home with the Black community, but our approach will be, I use the term minority. I know some people cringe at that term. I had trouble with it myself. It's a term that's used, in government to refer to communities of color in our country. I have a feeling that in our lifetime, we'll see the language around this change in our lifetime. But for now, that's the term I use. But certainly, think about my Latino and Hispanic brothers and sisters, my Asian American brothers and sisters, and my Native American brothers and sisters, who all have challenges within their own community accessing capital. And that's just the fundamental theme. So again, having sustainable pool of capital to be able to sustainably raise and deploy capital, I think gives us a new tool in the toolkit. Now, the key, I think, differentiator that we have is we're also not going to just invest with minority fund managers, but we also want to invest with funds that are leveraging what we've called, for lack of a better term, diverse strategies. So let's just say there's white folks who are out there who say, hey, I'm raising a $50 million private equity fund, and I want to identify Black-led businesses that we can acquire or partner with to invest. Right? There are people who may not be minority or who are not people of color who want to invest in our communities. Like I spoke to previously about being at the crowdfunding conference here in Baltimore recently, and so we want to be able to think broadly, right? And we don't want to narrow ourselves so much as a financial instrument that we're making poor investments. I don't care if you're Black, brown, or red or white. We want to have successful returns on our investment. That's going to be key to this community asset being sustainable. But we need people who are very much mission aligned and vision aligned. And that's with any economic or financial portfolio. They're going to have a certain thesis and a certain mission alignment and vision. And so we're not going to truly, in that case, discriminate on the person, but certainly want people to be very much mission aligned. And certainly there'll be every funder, allocator of color may not be mission aligned with us. And we're going to have to acknowledge that when that time comes. And so, but the last thought I have is I'm not scared. And, my uncle got sued. I would love to be in a position where I'm so successful, people want to come after me. That means I'm doing something. So I look forward to that day when that happens. But that's really our approach. And I'm really proud of the work. I have not had the chance to connect with the Fearless Fund, but I'm certainly watching and cheering them on. I think I've signed a few petitions that they put out, and I'm proud of those sisters and what they're doing, what they're standing up for. And I hope to be able to have the stature at some point behind me, if necessary, to stand with them more closely.
Absolutely. I think you guys would make quite the team. So you mentioned crowdfunding. I want to talk about that a little bit. I was doing a little bit of research, and the Brookings Institute shows that one of the other spaces that is really contributing to the wealth gap is disparities between equity investments, stock investments. And so I'm curious, there's this growing movement of especially younger people of color that have really gotten into investing, really gotten into stocks. And I'm curious if there's going to be an opportunity for the equity endowment to be an investment vehicle for your average retail investor that's interested in, as you mentioned, getting a return or contributing or in some way like that.
So as my grandmother would also say, I don't peep your whole card, but we certainly have looked at how do we have, perhaps a for-profit fund as part of our organization. So I
Yeah.
think, perhaps subordinate to the 501c. And I've also recently learned there's different models where you can actually be a 501c, have an investment fund, and within a 501c offer a return. So I'm still very much in the learning mode, and also still in the process of really defining down to the nit, as people would say in the legal field, what is the best strategy going to be, or where there are perhaps a unique intersection of some different strategies to really be able to have multiple tools in the toolkit to be able to attract capital. And so definitely thinking about different ways to do that and evaluating that closely.
Okay. I think I am uniquely positioned in that I know like just enough about funds and VC and PE to be like dangerous.
Right,
But
right.
it's still it's a world of mystery to me. And so, if I use myself as a model, I certainly don't have like a six-figure check that I can write to invest in the fund.
Right.
And I don't necessarily have a nonprofit of my own, where I would be seeking a grant. So for the masses, what do you want your fund or this endowment to mean to the average person? How would you like us to engage or to get involved?
Well, right now, by going to equityendowment.org and making contribution is the quickest way. I did have a little bit of social media chatter going, and actually literally working on remodeling my home office, as you can see behind me right now, to be able to produce more content. You can follow at Equity Endowment on Instagram and on LinkedIn. Those are the best two places right now, and we're going to bring some stuff back after the Easter holiday. But I think those are the best ways right now. But going back to your previous question as well, on the whiteboard, we've actually also considered how do we perhaps create a mutual fund or an exchange traded fund where someone who wants a return could also say, hey, I'm going to invest in this, and that we know the capital is going to be invested in with diverse fund managers and diverse strategies, as I described previously. And the leaders of this are also going to be taking an outside portion of the profit, so to speak, the carry, and granting it right through a 501c to nonprofits, right, that are going to be doing good work. And I've been very transparent. I feel called to this work, and I'm not, while I, of course, will, if I'm successful, will do well by doing good. I'm not in this to simply enrich myself, and so really want to be able to be above reproach, and our values are listed on our website about being able to be transparent. And having fidelity and being able to be a trustworthy steward of this community asset, and knowing that it will outlive me. I will not die on this hill, that there'll be a time, if I'm successful in this season, that there'll be a time to transition this organization to a new steward. And that's really my goal, is to be able to be a good steward in this season, and create something that everyone can participate in. So the hope is that perhaps one day you could go on your favorite investment app, like so many young people are right now,
Yeah.
and put in $100 and buy some shares of some equity endowment fund, right? That's investing in this really exciting portfolio that's really going back into our communities. And so, again, if we think about that, we think about the future and some of the fintech and technology that's on the horizon. I think, again, we're at a very unique moment where I really believe in what I'm doing, and this endowment's opportunity to not solve the problem, but be a unique tool, a new tool in the toolkit to really address this issue of wealth disparity.
Absolutely. I really appreciate that you have continued to be very transparent. I see that you're always providing updates on your social media as to where things are going. So give us the latest update as of March 2024 on where Equity Endowment is and what's coming next.
Well, right now, continuing to have conversations with some boutique financial firms and a number of banks here in the Mid-Atlantic region, and learning. Quite frankly, it's been a very challenging personal journey for me over the last 15 months. I kind of walked away from this for a while, but really, in my spiritual practice as a Christian, felt called back to this work, and I'm still trying to figure out how to really find and identify a sponsor. Certainly from a financial standpoint, looking for $250,000 or $500,000 to really give myself a year or two to really get into the rooms I need to get into fundraise, but also looking for thought partnership. I've kind of come to learn in this season that I think perhaps I might be more successful in a subordinate role or as a number two as within a larger organization with more infrastructure, with more thought partnership, with people with more experience or different experience, particularly in the finance world, than I have in order for this to be successful. Again, this need is so much bigger than what I can do. While I know I bring a unique perspective and an amazing family history and story and education and a great network, I really need to put together a team. So that's where I am right now. So again, visit equityendowment.org. Contribution certainly helps sustain me and keeps this thing going. But I'm certainly open to conversations with individuals and organizations that are willing to be helpful. And it's been interesting over the last year. I've certainly had the chance to talk to some organizations who passed. I've certainly made a number of outreaches to some organizations you might have heard of that have ignored me. And so it's going to be interesting when this is successful to see how some of those organizations respond. But I'm highly confident that a number of them will come back around in due time. And I have to accept that this is a very challenging thing because I'm engaging in what's called category creation.
Right.
To my knowledge, there's no other organization that is leveraging this approach to solve this issue. And so I recognize that for a lot of people, it's challenging for them to figure out what box to put me in. The banks want to know, when do we come do the photo op? When we come, help the kids paint the school, clean the park, and take pictures. I say, well, I'm not that kind of nonprofit. I'm really trying to create an innovative approach to close the wealth gap. So while a lot of institutions are interested in racial equity, this is a very novel, as you said, beginning this interview. So that's a challenge in and of itself to educate people and figure out how to best communicate and describe what we're doing and really identify the right audience that's going to catch the vision and really want to not stand behind me, but stand shoulder to shoulder with me to move this forward. So that's really the stage that I'm at, and I'm open to help, suggestions, ideas. This is so much bigger than me, and I'm certainly in a growth and learning season, but I'm excited and believe in this work and believe it's necessary. And I'm just excited and can't wait to be the answer to a lot of people's prayers.
Well, I commend you for maintaining the fortitude required to continue through to the ignored, outreach and the no's and all of that. Although I feel that you are no stranger to doing hard things. And for some reason, I feel like that might be related to this, as I mentioned before, legacy of entrepreneurship that you have. And so I'm curious, growing up in that environment with 5 generations of entrepreneurs, how has that shaped your approach to life, your worldview that may be different from someone who hasn't had that close connection and intimate relationship with an entrepreneur and people that are, creating things as you're doing right now?
And I think as I've gotten older, I've had to certainly recognize that my normal is not the normal of most people. And that's
right.
Most people, black, white, or otherwise, to be a 5th generation entrepreneur, 4th generation college graduate here in America. So it's certainly I've had to recognize that I've been blessed with a lot of privilege, but certainly believing to whom much is given, much is required. So as I look back over my life and over the time I have had with my family and what I've been able to learn and absorb, really figuring out how to put that into action in a unique way, and just been excited that the Equity Endowment could be that vehicle. Certainly my uncle's most famous saying was, keep going no matter what. And certainly having that tenacity and that level of focus has driven me, and I think driven many in my family and my ancestors to be successful, to move things forward. I come from a family of business owners, lawyers, and educators. And there's just so many amazing stories, and really having that awareness and having that knowledge of family history has buoyed me to this point, and helped me to persevere, because I know my ancestors faced obstacles, and thank God, because of what they did and what so many of all of our ancestors did, I won't have to face. But certainly in this day and age in 2024, I face my own unique challenges, as we described earlier in this interview. And so, again, keep going no matter what certainly drives me. But I know I'm blessed to have a certain perspective, a certain awareness, a certain knowledge, and most of all, I'm able to be encouraged, as you said earlier, because I've seen it. I've seen what my uncle was able to do, my father and others in my family were able to do, and I know it's possible. So I have that belief, and that certainly drives me towards executing and bringing to fruition this vision I have for Equity Endowment.
What a gift to have been so close to actually seeing it. It's not
a blessing. It's a blessing.
Abstract concept. It's something that's very tangible for you. So that is so amazing. I want to shift gears just slightly. because I'm local to the DMV.
All
I
right.
know you're in Baltimore. And last year you were appointed by Governor Westmore to be a volunteer commissioner to the Maryland Economic Development Commission. Congratulations on that
Thank you. Thank you.
appointment.
We met this week.
Oh, that's wonderful. And so I want to know, I'm fascinated by what's going on in Baltimore. I feel like there's just so much opportunity there. I feel like for a long time I was hearing mostly about like real estate, buying the block in Baltimore. But now it's also transitioned into being this like tech hub, to the likes of like in Austin and New York or excuse me, in San Francisco and things like that. And I just feel like there's so much going on there, and I see a lot of attention and intentionality being put into the area. So I'm really interested in, what you hope to accomplish in that role and what you see for Baltimore, within the next couple of years.
Well, honored to serve at the governor's appointment, certainly, and been friends with Governor Moore for close to 15 years. And it's been so exciting to be here in Maryland in this time to see what him and Don and his family been able to do and what they represent here in Maryland. And what I have to step back and realize when people call me and text me what they represent to the Black community and so many Americans, right? And
Yes.
what their family represents in this time and this generation. But this is certainly going to be Maryland's decade. And I stand on that. There's so many exciting things happening at University of Maryland Biopark. I mean, the Photon Cancer Research Center. My mother-in-law recently passed, but she would not have lived 5 extra years she lived without the cancer photon therapy that she was able to receive here in Maryland. My stepmother is still alive, having beaten cancer twice because of the unique therapies that have come out of this state. So there's so many things happening. I've been blessed to be appointed to an informal subcommittee that's going to be working on a strategic plan that's really going to pick. We've kind of narrowed it down about 5 key areas, but we're really going to make as a state, and I'm speaking as one person who's an appointee, not elected official, but we're looking at making 1, maybe 2, but certainly 1 to 2 large investments. And that's what's been successful in other states like Massachusetts and California and other places where they've made large, significant investments in like area like life science or cybersecurity or what have you. And so we're gonna be looking at that very closely in the months ahead as we get into year 2 of Governor Moore's administration, and really excited to be a part of that process of deciding where are we gonna seek to invest in terms of our infrastructure, in terms of our education, in terms of retaining and attracting the best talent, really looking even more so at the Gen Z and younger millennial and Gen Z generation. We want to attract the best talent when we think about innovation. And so it's an amazing time to be here in Baltimore, but also we still have work to do to close these equity gaps that existed. Again, my family's a 5th, 6th generation Baltimore family on both sides. Both my parents have long Baltimore history. Mm-hmm. And so I'm certainly very much aware and have the stories to tell about what Maryland has been, both pre-Civil War, post-Civil War, through being certainly a Jim Crow state below the Mason-Dixon line, and then really looking at the last 50 or 60 years post-civil rights area, what's happened in the city and in the region. And so there's certainly work to do to make sure no one's left behind, but I'm standing shoulder to shoulder and proud to do so with our governor, work, wages, and wealth. And we're going to leave no one behind, and that's our commitment. And that work has already begun in year 1 of Governor Moore's administration. And excited to be in year 2 and to play my small part and really figuring out how we're going to make this and ensuring that we make this decade the decade for the state of Maryland to be an example for a lot of communities throughout our country.
And I fully believe that this is Maryland's decade, but I'm just like, what is it? What happened within the last couple of years that has allowed Maryland to kind of catapult into this new space that it's heading into? I'm just like fascinated in how communities change, and I haven't been able to pinpoint like what the thing was that led to this.
Our governor's always said we've been resource rich, strategy poor. Now, if you think about a friend who's resource rich, they can stumble and bumble and fumble into some good things because they got resources, right?
Right.
If I had that resources, I know what I would do if I had. Right, you can just think about personified. You can think about, okay, someone a dumb squirrel can find a nut, but if a dumb squirrel has a bunch of nuts, they can survive the winter.
Absolutely.
They can't find another. So I think it's in some ways we've because of proximity to the federal government, because of our unique geography, because of our strong educational institutions. Right, I could go on and on. We have so many advantages here, but we've been strategy poor. And so it's exciting to be they said they want me to be a part of the strategic planning process. Okay, I'm just so humbled, and I don't want to oversell that, how humbled I am to really be a part of that, because I agree with our governor. We have been strategy poor, but there's been some good things happening. But I think now what we have is a leader and leadership throughout our legislature and throughout the state that's really focusing and has been galvanized by our governor to really focus on, okay, how do we pull all this together? How do we pull together University of Maryland, Johns Hopkins, Morgan State, Coppin State, right? We have great universities, Salisbury and Maryland Eastern Shore, HBCU on the Eastern Shore. So many things. We have agriculture, we have life sciences, we have cybersecurity. Again, we're proximity to the federal government, which gives us a unique opportunity. We have one of the largest and most active ports in the world here in Baltimore. And so how do we pull all this together and get everyone engaged, right, and leave no one behind? And so, again, there's been some interesting things happening in the last couple of decades that have spurred that. Certainly, DC becoming so expensive has led to real estate shifts in Baltimore. You can hop on the MARC train before the pandemic and virtual work. You can hop on the MARC train and go work in DC and then come home and live a heck of a lot cheaper in Baltimore. And again, having all the universities and some of those things have allowed us to be prosperous, very prosperous here in the state, but there's still been gaps. And so again, I believe this is Maryland's decade, and we wisely elected the right leader to galvanize it and pull it all together. It's not going to be perfect, but I think we can, again, really make this Maryland's decade, because we have, I think for the first time in a long time, have a clear vision and a clear purpose as to what we want to accomplish, and that we truly intend to include everyone. And we've never had that before in my lifetime, certainly.
Well, thank you for indulging my hyper local
question.
But I do think, it's a case study for what can happen in a lot of other communities. So I think it's an important conversation. So as we wrap up, I want to ask, you mentioned your grandmother earlier, and I'm a grandma's girl. Mm-hmm. So I would love for you to share any other tidbit of advice that you got from what I am sure is a very, very wise woman in your world, in your life. What has she shared with you that stuck with you throughout your years?
Well, when I think about equity endowment, I'll give you another quick one that she had. Nothing beats a failure but a try.
Ooh.
And this equity endowment, I've had people, even people, who I love. So, usually people with money start endowments. How are you going to start an endowment? What are you doing? Silly rabbit almost. I've had to say, well, we need a different approach to solving a critical problem. And not say I'm going to solve what this organization is going to solve, but there's critical needs that can be met by this approach, and it can be sustainable and outlive me. And who wouldn't want to be able to create something that is outliving them and continues to be a blessing and have impact well beyond their time of leading it or doing it. And so this is a very unique opportunity. So my grandmother was amazing. She lived to be 97 years old, and she passed in February of 2023. And she's 6 children, 14, 15 great grandchildren, and continues to have legacy. We have a Russell Fugett fund here in Baltimore and support, Catholic charities and other community organizations here in Maryland. I've understood there's potentially a new project underway. I want to talk about that just yet. I don't know a lot of the details, but her legacy certainly has lived on, and to be who she was, when she first had my uncle Reginald F. Lewis, 17-year-old teenage mom, high school dropout. And I remember asking her, I was probably 10 years old, what college did you go to? And she went to the School of Hard Knocks. And I turned around and said, well, where's that? And her and my grandfather just laughed at me. As I got older and you become a parent of your own, you begin to appreciate the sacrifices that she had to make and the challenges that she had to overcome to be able to raise my uncle and then marry my grandfather, Gene Fugett Sr., and then have 5 kids after that, the oldest of which being my father, Gene Fugett Jr. And so, and to be able to have 6 kids, all of which went to college, I think all 6 went to graduate school. And so that's been the importance of education, and all of which have been active in our community, from the NAACP and so many other organizations here throughout Maryland, and continues on through my uncle's foundation and the work that we do here in Maryland and in New York as well, tangentially. So it's just been a blessing. Her legacy lives on and will continue to live on, certainly as long as I have breath in my lungs. And it was a blessing to have her into my 40s, if I may date myself, to have my grandmother around and available to me so far into my life. I've been able to really appreciate her. I was able to ask her some questions that you only can really ask when you've lived some life and become a parent and done some things yourself and had some challenges yourself. And so she is missed and will always be missed.
Well, thank you for that. Thank you, Grandma Fugett. And what was it? Nothing beats a failure but a try.
Nothing beats a failure but a try.
I like that. I'm gonna keep that one.
Take it, take it. I give it away.
So
We-
remind us where we can find new information or updates about the Equity Endowment, about what you have going on. I know you have a book. Share all of the things.
Oh man, equityendowment.org. You can find us there. Again, it's a YouTube channel, LinkedIn, and Instagram page. Been kind of quiet the last couple of months. Again, my mother-in-law passed recently, and we've had some illnesses in my immediate family. But again, coming into the spring, I'm looking to ramp up some of the content and sharing, and just having more conversations like the one we're having right here about this topic around equity and closing the wealth gap. So also, you can subscribe, give us your email and email newsletter. Send an email out in December. We'll get one out in Q2 of this year. And so look forward to being able to communicate and build an audience and a community there to support and just really, stay tuned. But again, if you're interested in partnering or sponsoring, if you have thoughts, ideas, resources, Russell at equityendowment.org, please feel free to drop an email. I would love to hear from you. This is a community effort to create a community asset. And I'm certainly looking for community and for partnership to be able to move this forward. So I really am grateful for your time and for the HBCU Wall Street and all the content that you guys do and keeping so many conversations relevant to the HBCU community, to the Black community, vibrant and alive online and through this podcast and this platform. So thank you for having me today.
Well, thank you for being with us. I can't wait to have you back as the Equity Endowment continues to grow. I look forward to hearing about all of the amazing things that these grants do in the community. And I know it's going to be successful. So I thank you for taking time out of your schedule to join us today on the HBCU Wall Street Show.
Anytime. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. All right, listeners, we will catch you next time.
Hey, what's going on, HBCU family? This is Jamaris Payton, co-founder of HBCU Wall Street and author of HBCUnomics. I wanted to take a quick moment to thank each and every one of you all for listening in to the HBCU Wall Street Podcast Network. Hey, if you didn't know, we also have exciting shows called the HBCU DEI Talks, the Aggies Excel, and also the HBCU Podcast Show. Be sure to tune in, be sure to share, be sure to follow, be sure to join our community. Thank you.